can watch it back later. You can see my screen, Carrie?
Nope. It says waiting to view Jamie Black's screen. Oh, now I can.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so what we wanted to do was some TBA training. And I think everybody has sort of some basic exposure to TBA in terms of what time entry.
Yes.
Anthony, you're comfortable with time entry? Well, we don't have Anthony now? What the hell? Oh, he just went offline and he's coming back online here. It's one of those days, I can feel it. You there, Anthony? Are you there, Anthony?
Yes, I'm here. It kicked me out for some reason.
Okay. So you've done time entry in TBA, is that right, Anthony?
Yes.
So you're reasonably comfortable with that part of it?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
let's jump ahead then, and let's talk about some of the stuff that I think some of you may not know all of or any of, and then sort of more of the advanced features and some of the project management stuff that's in here. And this, Carrie, will give you maybe some insight that you can then match against the kind of things you're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
So I think probably what's going to happen is out of this meeting, Carrie, you specifically will be able to say, oh, okay, so there's of my list of 20 things we want to be able to do, we can do 5 of them today. We just have to use it better. And then the next 10 or 15 or whatever the number are, we maybe need to change how we do things, or we need to change TBA or something.
Okay.
So we built TBA, it was custom developed to meet the needs of public practice and the IT department. So we built it, we sat down, we did a ton of debate and discussion and argument about what the system should do, what was wrong with our old system. And what was wrong with the old system is that all it did was really track time. And it kind of did a shitty job of that, even. And it just made sort of one big pile of time per client. And then you had to kind of wade through and figure out what to bill because, oh, this part's related to GST. So I'm going to do one invoice for GST. So I'll bill this little chunk of time on GST. And this is a year end. So that gets billed out over here. So we radically changed the way we were going to track our time when we implemented TBA. And we built into it a whole bunch of management features. And I'm going to say 90% of those features are not used today, maybe 95%. And it's funny, when I look back now at TBA, it's just a slightly better time entry system, frankly, is all it's being used for. And so what I wanted to do was show you some of that other stuff that you guys weren't here for when we designed it. You might not even know that bloody thing can do it. And then we can talk about how do we move forward and get it being implemented or utilized a little better, let's say, as a starting point. So I wanted to just sort of pick an engagement here that we can work with. And Waldo's engagements, generally speaking, are really good examples. Because he is such a type A person, he's done a really good job, for the most part, of setting up his projects and using them properly. So what I wanted to do was start with this. Sorry, is everybody still there?
Yeah.
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 Okay. So I wanted to start with this one, and then I thought maybe we could switch gears, Carrie, and look at a couple of your engagements and see some of the differences. So this was a specific project. So you choose the client, and then you name the project. So this was an upgrade to one of Checkmate servers that we did. And we code it to the department. And by doing this, Tina, this is what classifies the transactions that come out of TBA that go into QuickBooks.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is what helps us identify what class this should go to. So this is an IIS project. We identify the manager, the start date of the project, the end date of the project, and if it's billable. And I can edit a lot of this stuff after the fact. So I just hit the edit current button, and up comes the update existing engagement. So I can change the name, I can reassign it to a different manager, and I can specify which staff should be allowed to do time entry on this project. And so what this does for us is it allows us to keep the time entry screen simple. So that, Anthony, when you go to enter your time, you don't see every engagement in the firm potentially. You only see the ones that are relevant for you, or Tina for you, or for me.
Right.
So we're going to press close. Now I won't bother saving anything. And then the very first thing you would do when setting up a new project is you would set up the phases of the project. So in this case, there's a planning stage, there's a fieldwork stage, and a completion stage. And then we can add a custom description. So this is the description for this project. This relates to the inventory item in QuickBooks, Tina,
Yeah,
which tells us which GL accounts to hit.
right.
And then we can rename these whatever we want. But generally speaking, they sort of break down into planning, fieldwork, and completion. And then we can have different managers of each phase. And then we can have different start and end dates for each phase. And what I'm going to suggest, Carrie, is that one of the things that is absolutely not happening in your engagements is these start and end dates are not being used anywhere. I suspect no one is even bothering with them. Maybe they look at this for 10 seconds, the start and end date of the entire engagement. But even then, probably not. Are you still there, Carrie?
Yeah, no, we don't use those dates at all.
Okay. So I think one of your requests was, we want to know, when things are due. When does this have to be done? Well, that's the start and end dates, right? So if this project, so can you give me an engagement that you're working on right now, Carrie?
I can't think of one that just closed. Moksha. Oh, I just build everything out.
That doesn't matter. So I'm sure we can find one. So here's Moksha Bookkeeping October.
Sure.
So this is October, and you can see the start and end date are set for the exact same day.
Right.
And so, one of the things that if I were in your shoes, I would say is, no, we can use this for planning purposes. When do we want to get started on this engagement? And when do we want to wrap this engagement up, roughly speaking?
Yeah, well, I think because no one had ever showed us a reporting function that would show all the engagements scheduled to start or all the engagements due at the end of the month. For us, those dates never seemed really important to us because you couldn't, not very often I'm going into every single engagement to see, okay, when should this start? When should it
So
finish?
I'm going to call bullshit on that statement right now, because this engagement manager, you and I sat down on a dozen times, and we can turn the start date on and we can turn on the end date for every one of your projects. So we can really clearly see. So for example, if I wanted to sort of set this up, I can say, well, hang on, I want to see, close this, for our PAS engagements, I want to group this by, let's say, manager. So I drag that up to the top. And then we'll come back in the PAS engagements. For Carrie's projects, here's our end date, here's our start date. Let's sort by start date. So here's all the engagements that should be starting in the next little while. Or let's sort this by end date. Here's the projects that should be ending in the next little while.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is the thing that, frankly, has been frustrating me. I don't know how many times I've gone through this engagement manager with various people, everybody in the organization. And I keep hearing that same comment. Well, we don't have a report yet. And I'm not going to say the engagement manager has everything you're going to need. That certainly is not true. But it's got a lot more than people are taking advantage of. And so they throw their hands up and go, well, yeah, I just put bullshit in there for start and end date because, well, I didn't think I could get a report. Maybe. I think probably, if I was being honest, and this goes to the IT side too, Carrie, not just you guys, I think often we're in such a rush to set up the project and just get going and get our time entered that we just go, blah, 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 let's get this thing going. Did we even set the budget up properly?
Mm-hmm.
So certainly for at the project level, start date and end date are in there. They're in that engagement manager screen. So I think if you're keeping a to-do list, I think one of the things would be to go through all of your engagements and have someone, each manager, whatever it is, fix those dates. And we built logic in so that if you change these dates, it's going to ask you a question. So if I do this, so maybe it doesn't matter if I change the start date. So here you go. So the engagement will be shifted forward, meaning it will complete on the 30th as it cannot be compressed. So you run into this kind of interesting thing, which is if I change my start and end dates, or if I change my start date, should it automatically, are we just saying, no, we're going to start it later? The client brought us the work late. It's still going to take us a month to do, so we should shift the whole project? Or are we just going to do the project in less time? Does that make sense, Carrie?
Yeah.
So in this scenario, what we're saying is the client brought the work in late, so we're just going to shift the project. We're going to start it later and we'll finish it later. So there's some logic there that we'll have to talk about and work through and make sure you guys understand how it's going to work. And so what I might suggest that you do here is, so I could come in and change the end date now, and we can move the end date out till, November 30th, let's say. And here you can see it asks you the question, what do you want to do? Extend the engagement or shift the engagement? We're going to extend it. We're going to say save. So Carrie, you might want to be part of this, the first 3 or 4 or 10 of these that you do, just to make sure that things are behaving the way you want them to in terms of shifting versus compressing, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I would say the first thing to do would be to get the start and end dates for the project set up properly. And then you can run reports. What projects are supposed to be done soon? Which ones are we supposed to start soon? And you can do it by manager, by department, by project. And then once we've got that done, we can start talking about your start and end dates of your phases. So right now in this simple engagement, there's the bookkeeping phase, there's review, and then the final billing. But one of the things, depending on how you structure your engagements, Carrie, for example, if we were doing a year end and there's a tax return to do, would those be two separate projects or all part of one project?
All part of one project.
So what you might want to do then is make sure that the tax return was its own phase, because then it can have its own start and end date. And you can set an end date that's very specific. It has to be done by this date.
So let's say, for instance, so we'll send out the engagement letter for a October year end in October, but we won't start the engagement for 3 or 4 months. So one phase on its own would just be the engagement letter, so it would have entirely different dating than the actual
Well, we
project.
have to develop what kind of rules you want. I don't know. So now you're talking about a specific task. So underneath our phases, which are sort of the segments or the chunks of the engagement, we can assign tasks. So what you might do in that scenario is there's like as a phase, there's a preparation or getting started phase, if you will. And one of the tasks under that phase could be send out engagement letter. And our tasks here that you can see, we've got individual hourly rates and budget amounts, as well as an assignment to. And you can see that they fit in here, but we could really easily assign a due date by task
Okay.
so that we can, so you don't have to come up with 50 phases because that kind of is, sort of wonky. But we could very simply add a due date to the task. We didn't do it because people weren't even using the dates that we had already.
Mhm.
So now for Anthony and Tina, the way we come up with the budget here for the project, the $751, is after we set up our phases, we add tasks under those phases. So for this bookkeeping phase, there's bookkeeping, there's non-recoverable time, there's client correspondence. So we budgeted 0.75 of an hour for client correspondence. We budgeted 0 time for non-recoverable and 7.5 hours for bookkeeping. And this is the hourly rate, and it was supposed to be through Raphael.
Okay.
And so the budget for this phase is $510. That's the sum of the budget for the tasks. And then we have the review stage, and then we have the final billing stage. And all of that adds up right here to $751, the budget for the project. Does that make sense to everyone so far?
Yeah.
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 Okay. So one of the other things that you would want to consider at some stage, Carrie. So again, I think what you're going to want to do is bite this off in little chunks because there's a bunch of work to be done here, right? Step one, let's get the start date and end date in place, and then let's start using that on the engagement manager. And then we maybe drill down and start thinking about our phases in a little bit more detail. And do we have enough phases set up? And do we have the right manager set for our phases? And do we have the right start and end dates for our phases? And then we come down to the task level. Do we have the right tasks assigned? And I would bet that you have the right tasks assigned, but maybe not enough detail. You could take advantage of having more detail.
So,
And
Jamie, do
yeah,
you add a task? Do you add a task underneath every phase you put in?
that's right. So here I click on bookkeeping and I'm going to
Okay.
say, oh, there's a new task, training Anthony, and I'm going to assign that to Harry, and it pulls up his default hourly rate, and we're going to say Harry's going to spend 2 hours with Anthony, and I'm going to add that task, and that's what slotted that in and bumped our budget up.
Right. Okay. And
Make
that
sense?
bookkeeping came from the phase tab, right?
This top level,
Yeah.
that's right. That's there because it's here on the phase
Okay.
tab.
Okay.
So it was this really
Okay.
specific hierarchy that we built so that we could understand. And where this came from was on a number of our projects on the IT side, on the public practice side, I wouldn't talk to one of our staff for 5 days. And then I'd go in and run a report and go, holy shit, the guy's $500 over budget. And it was a $100 budget. Was he crazy? And then you'd go back and try and figure, well, why did we come offside? What part of this project fell apart? And so in this stage, what we could do, the reason we implemented phases is then Carrie could say, listen, we're doing okay on the fieldwork budget, but our review, we're way off the rails on our review budget. We were only supposed to spend $100 in review, and we're spending $400 on review. And then Carrie could drill down by task and say, why is that? Oh, the partner review. It's taking way too long at partner review or something. So is this idea of being able to aggregate our data, both actuals and budget. And so I think probably one of the things that's also happening, maybe, Carrie, in your world is people aren't not only updating the dates, but they're not putting the right budget amounts in. I don't know if that's true or not.
I think on most we have like a standard NTR budget that's typical to most year ends, and then we have the actual budget within caseware because that template to import them broke, so you have to kind of refer to both places.
Well, so what I would suggest is one of the things is you should have your actual budget in the time billing system. Because then when you do your time entry, so we come in and we choose a client here. And so if I choose Moksha, you're going to see Moksha isn't even in my list because I'm not assigned to that project. But if we choose Mount Royal, let's say, and so here's my Mount Royal Gap Financials implementation project. I'm going to say statement customization. And that's the project and the phase. And then I can choose the task, which is building the financial statements. I can see here, what was the original budget? 15 hours. How much time have we actually spent? 29 hours. So this is the warning to the end user at the time they're doing their time entry. Wait, you're in trouble. You're way over budget. And so now when they come in, they enter their time. So they can see we previously spent 29 hours on this task. I'm going to put in another 2 hours on this task. And then we ask them, how much do you think is left to get this done? And this is something that people never use either. They always leave this as zero. But the idea here is this is your, if I'm just a junior, you just hired me last week, Carrie. This is my chance to warn my manager that I think I'm going to go over budget. I've already spent 29 hours. I spent 2 more hours today, so we're at 31. And I think we have 15 more hours to go. And once this row recalculates, you're going to see my estimated variance is actually going to wind up being like 31 or whatever that is, 17 on top of the 29. But by having that budget in there, you're giving feedback to your people right away when they're doing their time entry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So, I mean, the comment that you made, which was that, well, we haven't been doing it because the import of the budget hasn't been there. I think probably if you have a standard setup, that like a template that you're copying, it should just be a matter of going through here and updating the hours, changing the person it's assigned to. And I bet that wouldn't take a ton of time, for an individual project if you were keeping up with it.
Hmm.
And then it would simplify all the back end stuff. Oh, who's assigned to that project and how do we reallocate it? And then there's a direct expenses tab, which I don't think you guys deal with at all, do you? You don't have any or very limited direct expenses except maybe like John Sanger or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Courier sometimes.
So you could add some expected expenses here. So Anthony and Tina, on the carry or on the IT side of the world, it's really common for us to have a whole whack of direct expenses. So we'll go out and buy a server for someone and a bunch of office licenses and that kind of stuff. So as we start to build this budget, we want to budget for those direct expenses as well.
So
So that's
Jamie,
the sort of the initial setup stage of these projects. And then once that setup is done, then we can come in and start doing our billings. And so there's been no bill on this engagement as yet. If I come back and choose one where I know there has been one, Mohawk College, let's say. And there you can see we've got a bunch of different phases. So we've got multiple fieldwork phases because we wanted to break it down between statement customization, implementation support, first year support, and then overall admin. And then if we come down into our billing stage, here's all the different invoices that we've generated. So if I click on one, and so here what you can see is this is what we budgeted for these phases. So these bills are being done by phase. Here's what we budgeted for the phase. Here's how much has previously been invoiced for this phase when this invoice was done. The amount of time, the value of the time that had been entered, and the amount we decided to bill. And so here you can see WIP was 420. We decided to bill 800. We wrote it up by $380. 1680 to 3200. We wrote it up by 1520. And then what we would do is we'd come in and we would edit the invoice text to say what should show up in QuickBooks for Tina in this case. And the dollar amount here needs to equal this amount here. Otherwise, you'll get an error message. And then you can set the status of the bill to review. And that then allows you to run reports to see what invoices are waiting for me to review. So what I do when it's sort of this time of month, and Tina, I'm sure you're about to yell at me for being behind on this, is I run an invoices by status report. And I go in and I say, okay, in the to be reviewed column under IS, what IS invoices are there waiting for me to review? So Waldo has $40,000 of invoicing waiting for me to review and push out. And so here they are, the date of the invoice, the budget, the real value, i.e. the WIP value, and then the amount we're billing it for. And so I would go through and make sure that this list was empty by theoretically, by the 10th of every month. Right, Tina? I'm always on time?
correct. Yeah.
Hey, what are you laughing about? There's not supposed to
I
be any laughing. That was serious.
I am just laughing to keep us on a light note.
Yeah, there you go. You're laughing with me. That's it. So that's sort of the idea behind the flow of this thing. And so one of the things that I think too could be better taken advantage of that I often see is, and Carrie, as a manager, you'll like this. We ask, so I'll say to Daryl, okay, Daryl, can you go out and do all the bills for your clients, please? And often it'll be, well, I don't know what bills I should do. So I would get Daryl to go to the engagement manager, and he could flip this around and put manager first. So here's all the engagements he's the manager of, and open that up. And so there's two different departments: caseware and e-services. So we'll open up the caseware department. So here's all of his active caseware engagements. And then what I would have him do is sort this by current WIP so that the engagements with the highest current WIP go to the top. And this is where he would start and work his way down this list and generate invoices for all of the ones over, some minimum dollar amount, $400 or $500, whatever it happens to be. And then once that bill is pushed to QuickBooks, it will reduce this report, this list, and put it back down to the lower amount. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, Carrie, as I recall, some of the things that you were after was you wanted to see a list of all of the GST related engagements that are due this month, like that kind of thing, right? Show me all the year ends that we have to get done this month.
Right.
So, part of that would be due date. So, sorting by due date, getting the due dates fixed. And then the other one might be either engagement names. So you can see we've been decent lately in the casework side of the world with naming our engagements the same thing if they're the same. So, year end is how we would start it because then we could clearly see, oh, what's due on the 30th? Oh, it's the financials implementation. So that would be one way to do it. We could put in, if that wasn't um, granular enough for you, because people are going to name things differently, it would be pretty trivial for us to put in. So here's 2013 NTR. I might change the way you label this. I might make it NTR 2013 or something, and then use these dates to give you better indication of what it's for or when it's due.
Okay.
But we could pretty easily add another field for you that allowed you to categorize what type of engagement is it. Year end, personal tax, corporate tax, GST, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
That would be about 7 seconds of work for us. If that helped you group and filter and run reports.
So our issue, I think, is we have multiple due dates, I guess. So we have, I guess, let's say we're trying to turn engagements in 1 month from the time they come in the door, clear all the issues, have the year-end meeting, and get it out. So the time it comes in could be our start date, except the engagement letter has to go out first. But then the end date would be the time that we want to get it out the door. But then we also have a payment deadline and a filing deadline that would need to show up somewhere. So we have like our project end date, but then it should also show what the filing deadline is, so we are just aware of it, or if there's a bank filing deadline that needs to be adhered to.
Okay. So we could do, I think there's probably a couple answers to that. On some of those things, you're talking about when these tasks are due. So, like under tasks here, we can have task deadlines. So here, engagement letter / budget. This one maybe is a good example. This one is we could have a due date for this task. So here,
Okay.
when should the client meeting take place, or when should the CRA meeting take place, or that kind of thing,
Mhm.
so that you can have deadlines for every task. And then
So I
there's
could
some.
just have like a financial statements to bank task and put the due date.
That's it. And to some degree, that makes sense to me. The only downside, maybe, to that approach would be some of these things perhaps don't necessarily have WIP attached to them. Like financial statements to bank, well, there's an actual activity you have to do, so let's put in 0.25 for that task. Make sense in terms of a budget for it?
Mhm.
It's going to take you 15 minutes to actually send it. So in that case, it makes sense to me that there would be a task associated with it with a deadline. But some things they're not necessarily a task, they're just a date that you need to track, like a relevant date for this project.
Right.
Like a bank reporting or a filing date with CRA. So we'd want to maybe think our way through which of those shouldn't really be tasks. And then we could give you additional dates if you're going to use them. That's, again, 10 seconds of work for us to make that modification.
Okay.
So I think maybe what we might want to do is I think we might do two things. One is as sort of cleanup, go through all of our existing projects and close all the ones that should be closed. I don't know if you've been doing that. I think you have.
I've been doing it. Yeah. Every time I bill an engagement out, I close all the prior engagements that relate to it.
Good. So that's one thing that's going to keep the noise down. So then if all we have are real active engagements, let's go through and clean them up. And let's make sure the manager is set properly. I saw some in there for Wendy, for example.
Yeah.
Let's make sure the start date and the end date are set properly. And for your department, let's define what that means to you. Is the start date when we expect to receive the information from the client? Is it when we want, like what does it mean to you? And what
Mhm.
does the end date mean to you? Are those the due dates with the bank? Is that the due date when we want the project to be, wrapped up entirely?
Yeah.
And then start to define internally, what do we mean by these task start and end dates? What does that mean? As opposed to, phase start and end dates, as opposed to, some specific task. When should the engagement letter go out by? And so
So
that's one of
then
the, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, from your engagement manager view, can you drill down to a phase or task level?
Not at this
To,
stage. And that was, remember I said that there was a request that we had into Waldo for some
mhm.
enhancements for us. So there's a separate task manager here. So there's just like we have the engagement. What is Anthony doing here? You still there, Anthony? Hello,
Yeah, I
hello.
keep getting kicked out. It keeps telling me that it's running into an error.
Are you on the
Hello?
terminal server or are you on a local?
Local.
I wonder why that is. All right. Have you been able to keep up so far with what we were talking about?
Yeah, except for I just missed the last little bit because it kicked me out. I logged back on, and then it kicked me out again, and then I just logged back on now.
Okay. So we're recording this. I'll send you the video afterwards, and you can watch it back and hear all the
Okay,
bad things we said
perfect.
about you.
Okay.
So
Great.
under Task Manager, so you can see here that we have task start date and end date, budget hours, budget rate by person, by task name, estimated remaining, etc.
Okay.
So, what I would do is I'd come in and say, okay, so show me all the tasks I'm assigned to. So I just filtered it to only show me my tasks. And then let's sort this by start date. And then there probably is a complete option in here where I can say, don't show me complete tasks. So there is a complete. Where am I seeing that in my column header? Yeah, so here, these are all completed tasks. So I would filter that and say, no, no, only show me tasks that aren't complete. And I don't know, let's group that by, see what we have here for options. So we have client name and we have engagement name. So those are over here. So let's group that by client name and then group that by engagement name. So here's all my tasks for the client. Or maybe I don't want to group it by client. Maybe what I want to do is just this client name. Let's drag that over to the left here. Come on.
I didn't even know you could do all that crazy filtering, like the dragging up there
Yep.
stuff.
And then drop it. So now let's sort it by client, maybe. And then show me which of these projects I need to be working on. So you can tailor all these things really easily. A couple other things you can do that's kind of interesting is you can sum. So this is more useful on the engagement manager screen. So remember I was saying I want to know, or Daryl wants to know what bills he can generate. So if we come in here, one of the things we could do for Daryl is we could click on the current whip, the little sum sign, and I want the sum. And there's a sum of the total whip for Daryl's project. So in many ways, these screens are way better than reports in that you can drag it and drop it and twist it and turn it so that you can sort of manipulate it the way you need to see it today, as opposed to just a static report that you'd have to dump out to Excel to do this with.
Hmm.
So
Can
like,
you highlight?
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, you know how you sorted Daryl's screen by all the biggest whip amounts to determine what he could bill?
Yep.
Can you just quickly highlight those and sum them so you know, oh sweet, I can do $30,000 worth of bills right now?
That's a good one. No, not at the moment. But I can do a couple other things. I can right click and I can highlight all my over budget projects. Or I can turn that off and I can highlight all the projects that I think are about to go over budget. And that's based on that estimated remaining, which nobody uses. And then we
So if
can
we,
add or remove columns if you want here too, clicking this little box at the top. So I could turn off, no, no, listen, let's get rid of, I don't care about estimated remaining WIP, and I don't care about estimated remaining, so that this screen is smaller and simpler and doesn't have any noise on it. So the next thing that we were going to start to build in here was, so we've got a task manager, we've got an engagement manager. It might be something along the lines of one of those management screens that allows you to see in aggregate everything for a client. So what I was thinking was that I could go to a client manager screen and it would show me information from a bunch of different places. So it would pull in the accounts receivable balance from QuickBooks for us and some sort of indication of whether they were overdue or not. And maybe it would give me a link to their engagement letter folder. Maybe right in the actual engagement window, I could give you a link to the engagement letter that was sent out to this client. You know, like another tab here called documents, so that we could see all the pertinent documents.
I think that would be really good for us because I think our biggest difficulty, I know you said there was a way to do this in the engagement manager, but we never went through it, was on an engagement by engagement basis, we can determine, you know, what to bill and what we've written off for this client and things like that. But if you want to look at one client, let's say over the last 3 years, did we have write up or did we have write off, and should we bump this bill a little bit? It's things like that that are hard for us to do without drilling into all their monthly bookkeeping engagements, all their GST engagements, all their
So I'll
year-end
show you
work.
how I would do that now. So what I would do is I'd come back to my engagement manager, and so give me the name of an engagement that you want to answer that question on today.
Um, let's do Richard Wall's Staber Hotel.
Okay, so I'm going to filter this. And set under Richard Walls, or what's that under?
It'd be Staber.
Oh, I probably have this filtered already. So let's do this. Staber Hotel. So here's all the engagements going back to 2007. And what we can do here is slide over. All right, so there's the engagement name. So let's drag that back over here. Oh, this is the task manager. Sorry. And then we're going to go here and reset. And then we're going to filter this. So I was on the task manager instead of the engagement manager. That's why I was showing all the individual tasks. Staber Hotel. So here they all are. And what we're going to do is sum that. So you've got a write-off of $3,000 or the history of all the Staber Hotel projects.
Okay.
And then, so that took 10 seconds. And what
Mm-hmm.
we'll do is we'll come down here and we'll say whip build to date. And we should be able to see this if I do, let me slide over. So there's whip build to date, sum that. So we build $21,000 of whip. And there should be an invoiced amount. I think it's previously invoiced, that's what it's called. Where did that go? So there's roughly your $3,000.
Okay.
So that's pretty good. I guess just maybe a date sorting feature would be good because I think
What do
for
you,
us, I
sorry,
mean,
what do
our
you mean a date
departments,
sorting feature?
so because our department is getting sort of better and better at write off and trying to get right up. So maybe we wanted to ignore 2007. Maybe we just wanted to look at the last 3 years and
Sure. So
see how
if
much
you'd been
we've
using your
improved.
start date and end date to filter based on those, if they meant
Hmm.
something, that would have told you, oh, how much that write off relates to this year versus last 3 years or something. That's what you mean, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would suggest, and I mean, to tell you the truth, Carrie, I don't particularly care if you implement some other system. But I think you're going to have the same problem there you're going to have here. There's no magical solution. If you're not using this stuff here, I don't know necessarily why you would use it there. And the problem with these systems, generally TBA and your new one, is it requires people to do the data entry, to set it up properly, to spend the time. You know, it's like garbage in, garbage out thing. And
Right.
if people aren't spending that time, then you wind up with a very, limited ability to do these kind of analyses.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Well, I
from my
think part of
perspective,
it
you
for
choose whatever
sure.
you'd like to do.
Well, I think part of it is not knowing um, all the ways that we could implement and use this engagement manager. I think you've shown a lot of things that will help. And then there's a lot of things that this other software does do, like, which might be caught in your client manager screen that you were talking about. So right now we have an Excel document to track the clients that we do T4s for, and we have an Excel document to track year-end dates and when the engagement letter should go out and when it comes back received and who received it, and did we get assigned T183 to allow us to file the T2, because you can't file without authorization, and you need a signed client rep letter on hand, and if we were going to get peer reviewed by CMA, they would ask to see all these things. And that right now we're tracking that for all of our T1s and year ends and T4s all separately in different Excel spreadsheets. And that was something that other software included as part of, so one-stop shop, instead of having 10 different Excel spreadsheets that are, I guess, pretty at risk for human error and entering and deleting things. It was, I guess, more secure and sort of encompassed all that information in one spot.
So I think that's a great idea. I think all those little silos that you talked about, those Excel buckets, I think that's a really good idea and would give you real good value getting rid of all that. So if you could come up with a list of what those checks are, it's almost like a checklist.
Yeah.
And some of them relate to the client, like a T183. Some of them relate to an engagement. Did we get the signed engagement letter back?
Right.
So it's sort of like this little checklist tab that we could have, one on the engagement and one on the client manager. So for us, Tina, on the caseware side, same thing. Did we get the engagement letter back signed? Did we receive the retainer? Would be another thing.
Right.
All those things we're sort of doing manually. The other thing that we have the same kind of problems on that we envision this client manager dealing for us, poor Anthony, that we imagine the client manager doing for us, Carrie, was tracking who bought what software from us so that when there's a change, we can follow up with them. Give us a list that we can do an email mail merge with and send out an email to all the people that meet this criteria. It'd be the same kind of thing for you. Are they a T4 client? Are they a GST client? Are they a such and such client? Okay, send an email blast out to all of our T4 clients that say this.
Right.
And so having that ability to do the dump of all the contact information out so that Anthony could use like Constant Contact, a good email system, I think that would be the way to do it. So if you want to, as part of this sort of a parallel project, so I think one phase is let's get the stuff cleaned up inside of TBA. Because even if you move to this other system, you're going to want to have all this ready to go to convert into the new system, right?
Right.
So what I'm going to suggest is that you go through your engagements and start at the beginning. Get the start and end dates for your engagement set and start to think about what those mean. And we can give you the ability to change the name instead of start date and end date. If you want that to be renamed to something else for your engagements, that's easy to do. And then we want to go down and then start looking at the phases. And do we have the right phases set up? Do they make sense? Should we have more phases? And then what tasks should be in there so that we can set due dates up for our tasks? And then are there bigger, broader due dates that have to be incorporated that don't relate to tasks?
Right.
So we can have an important dates tab. So if you want to start to go through and come up with a list of what those things are, we can get Waldo to build that stuff in pretty simply, I think. And he's going to be ready to start doing building soon. He's been hung up on a bunch of other projects for us. And I want to turn his attention to this before the end of the year. So that come January 1, we've got some of these enhancements already in TBA.
Yeah, it'd be great for us to be able to have it implemented and then all of us aware of how to use it properly before we get into the busy season.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you want to do that, that would be good. And then we're making forward progress without having to buy new software and then implement the new software and convert from the old system.
Mhm.
And it's going to give you more actionable information. The minute someone starts fixing this stuff, you're going to be able to take advantage of it right away.
Okay, well, I'm going to put Carrie to work tomorrow on
Good.
start dates anyway. And
Yes.
then Jordan and Curtis sat in on the client track, I guess, webinar with me. So I'll get their assistance in creating a list. Some of it will probably need us explaining to you what we mean, but
Yeah, that's fine. So, and just clarify, especially when it's like a checklist, is this a checklist that relates to an engagement? Or is this a checklist that relates to the client?
mhm.
And then we'll know where to build those things in. Okay. All right. Did you have anything else for me, anyone? Tina, did you have any unanswered questions or anything?
Jamie, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
When I'm getting vendor invoices, I'm always getting the question, has this expense been entered in TBA?
Sure.
Is there a way that I can go in and have a quick look to see?
Absolutely.
I'd like to
So
know this as well.
what you're going to want is to know what engagement it relates to. It's going to be the fastest, easiest way for you to track this down. So if I go to Protelic Alarms and I take a look at that Checkmate server upgrade,
Haha.
and so here's my task budget and my expenses budget. So here you can see Waldo has a budget of $2,700 for hardware, $1,179 for software, and travel expenses of $0. And so just like you would from a WIP perspective, you want to go in and see whether those expenses are recorded. Just trying to see whether we have one of them in here. So there'd be two different things. If we take a look at our WIP build to date, so here you can see the only thing that we've built so far is $3,200 worth of hardware. And you can see units entered. So he's entered $2,900, and that was this invoice.
Yeah.
And then he entered this and this.
Okay.
So that would be the place to go, is to go take a look at the WIP to see whether or not it has been entered yet. And what we might want to do is ask Waldo to put the invoice number in here so you could match it up or something. You know, if you're trying to see, was this invoice entered?
Yeah, but he's usually pretty good with his descriptions, so.
Yeah. And you see, this is the invoice that it was billed out on. So
Right.
this is WIP build to date. So there's two places you would check. One is, has this been entered and already billed? These have been entered and already billed.
Right.
And then the next question is, has it been entered and not yet billed? So that's current WIP. And so here you can see type expense. So here's the server license.
Okay. Yeah, see, the only thing I would maybe ask Waldo is in his notes is to put actually who it was purchased from.
There you go. That's a great
Like if
idea.
it was that NCIX or.
That's it. Why don't you send him an email on that today and just say, you know, Waldo, you're real good about entering those invoices. Can I ask you to do one thing? When you enter it, can you put the name of the vendor in the notes, please?
Okay.
So just for purposes to kind of show how this plays out with one that specifically Tina actually asked me to look for, which was a FedEx charge, and it was I think it was like $16, and it was for, I want to say Pro Ag. Is that right, Tina?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and it was for Pro Ag. Can you show me how, like, can you just show me how you'd find it?
Sure. So the one thing that's a little bit challenging when it comes to managing direct expenses is it would be nice to go in and search for all FedEx invoices. But we don't actually book invoices that way in TBA. So what you'd do is you go back to Waldo and you go, what was this for, Waldo? What project?
Okay.
And then once you know that, you would then select the right project. So, Waldo said it was tech support.
Oh, okay. So you wouldn't look under data entry at all for this?
No.
Oh,
That's
okay.
That you're by doing it that way, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
Yes, and that's kind of how I was directed, and I noticed that yes, you will drive yourself
Yeah.
crazy.
So that's kind of you're doing that way is sort of like the bottom up. I'm going to suggest you
Okay,
go top down. You put a call into whoever incurred the expense and say, what project was this for?
right.
And then pull up that project and go in there and say, all right, so it's either going to be part of our current WIP or part of our build WIP. So pull up your
Okay.
build WIP, and then you can pop open field work. And so here's some of our hardware and direct expenses. So you can see these are time entries, these tasks.
Yeah,
So it's either going to be under one of the two expenses, FedEx shipping.
Yep, there
perfect.
it is.
Right there. Okay. Ah, okay, great.
So it'd be one of those two approaches. It's still, I mean, a little bit more manual work than I would like, but it didn't take that long.
It's
No.
straightforward though, and that's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really
Yeah, you're not
straightforward.
sort of
So
randomly scrolling around for half your life trying to find the
no, and
perfect
you're
thing.
not clicking all these dates that are around the time to see if it's been entered, and yeah. So yeah, okay, awesome.
Okay. So, and I don't mean, Carrie, by any stretch to say that TBA is the most perfect, awesomest thing ever developed. And I do understand that the public practice needs have evolved since we wrote this thing. But I definitely did have this sense that we really weren't fully utilizing it.
For sure.
And maybe before we switch, we see if we can't more fully utilize it. And the one thing we have here is we custom wrote this, so we can make this do whatever in the hell you want it to do. There'll be a question, of cost versus return, right? If you ask me to make this do something that's going to cost 50 grand to develop, but you could buy it for 3 grand, okay, well, sure.
Right.
Right. So my other question is, and this might tie back to kind of what we were touching on at the beginning of this call, but come tax season, when we're receiving all the personal taxes, and I have to go in and I have to create engagements for all the personal taxes. The process of doing that is going to be going into this process of engagement management,
So
selecting
there's,
my client.
are you asking, is that your question?
Yeah, like would it be the process of going into engagement management, selecting my client, and then entering the phases, and then entering the tasks underneath the phases, and then everyone, and then to my knowledge, all of the accountants assign themselves to the tasks.
Sure. So that would be you could do it that way. That would be the long, hard way to do it.
Okay.
What we've got up at the top for engagement list is a bunch of templates. See, pound template.
Okay.
So what you can do is come in and say, oh, here's a T1 prep template. If you pull that up, this is sort of a standard default setup for a T1 prep. It has the phases set with some
Okay.
descriptions. It's got some default manager set. And the thing is, nobody ever updates these dates, right? So they go, oh, yeah, this is perfect. And then they just leave the dates to roll year after year after year.
Right.
So what we would want to do is say, oh, is this the right template to use? You can see it has all of these tasks built into it. So then you would say, yeah, this is the one I want to use to do Jamie Black's tax return. So then I would come into the template and I would
Just
hit
edit
the
it.
edit button
Okay.
and I would say copy to new.
Right.
And what it's going to do is put you in that copy.
And it'll create the phases and the taxes or the tasks.
Absolutely. And so the first thing you want to do after you create the new one from that template, come on, terminal server, come back in and edit it and change the client. You see it left the client as TBA client.
Yep.
So you just come back in and change it. Oh, this should be for, whoever it is, Jamie Black.
Okay.
Between accounting files. Oh, so it just thought I was, because we're using two separate QuickBooks files.
Right.
So it won't let you move an engagement from one QuickBooks file to another QuickBooks file.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think that's going to wind up being much of a problem for you. If it is, let me know.
Okay. I
So
will.
then you would change the client that belongs to and then choose which staff belong to it. I don't know about people adding themselves. I don't know about that part. And clearly you wouldn't want Wendy to be the manager.
Right. Well, I think I think the process is that I add everybody that is here and like that everybody who possibly would be a part of
Very good.
the process of it, and then I think that as on the tasks tab, to my knowledge, they would assign themselves to whatever task.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. So
Right?
here they would self-assign to who's going to do this task.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And Carrie, is that the process that will take place come March, February, or whenever?
Well, ideally, we'll just start using, because when we do the budgets in Excel and Caseware, they have a specific person assigned to it who we are pretty sure is going to work on the file. So
Okay.
we'll just get either you or Carrie, probably Carrie, to input the actual people hours and rates per the Excel budget in Caseware.
So what
Okay.
I might suggest you do also, Carrie, before that happens, is you could update your TBA template to be more accurate than this.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's not going to be Raph doing the profile setup.
fair enough.
So
Yeah,
if
because
we
like
made the
Jason,
template sort of more roughly accurate, and then it would be less work to update the specific exact client file. I think that's probably the place to go.
yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So, I mean, using this template functionality actually can save you a fair bit of that legwork in terms of setting up the phases and the tasks. Spend
Right.
the time to configure and update and maintain your templates properly, and you're going to be in better shape.
Right.
And then there is this import function from Excel. And as Carrie was saying, that got broken a while back, I guess. I sort of thought it was fixed again, Carrie.
I think Daryl tried 3 different templates and he sent them to me and none of them worked. And we
Okay.
just kind of left it at that.
So we can get Waldo on that. So the idea then is that you would just import your phases and tasks, Anthony.
Okay.
But that might be step 3 or 4 in our list.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to delete this project. Oh yeah, so there's a protocol here that you can't delete a project that already has phases,
Right.
and you can't delete phases if it has tasks. So you just quickly go through and remove. You can remove tasks pretty easily as long as they don't have WIP. So there's a bit of a control so that people didn't blow out engagements that had WIP in it, and then all of a sudden we lost $10,000 of billable time.
Right.
So now that those tasks are gone, we come back to the phases tab, and we can delete them. You just click on the row header. Oh, it's got to be saved and reloaded. That's interesting. Okay, we'll see what I've done there. I'll get that cleaned up. Were there other questions?
No, I'm good.
No, I'm
Okay.
good.
So I'm sure a lot of these
I'm
questions
good
will
for
come up
now.
as we start cleaning this stuff up, Carrie.
Right.
You'll start digging into it going, hey, could we do this? So this will probably spurn a bunch of issues, questions, requests, which is great. That's fine. That's sort of what's intended. And then let's get it working properly for us so we don't have to do so much side stuff. Like Anthony, right now you're keeping an engagement letter listing.
A log, yeah.
Yeah. So that whole thing should disappear.
Okay. With
That
TBA, like TBA will.
take on that task. That's right. So we
Right.
should be able to see by client, was the engagement letter issued? Yes. When? Was the signed engagement letter received? Yes. When?
Okay.
So that's the
Also,
kind of. Go ahead.
I was just thinking something I think that would really help us, and I know that I'm slowly cleaning up all the engagements that are in TBA, so it'll be less of an issue, going forward, but the ability to move time from one engagement to another. So if you accidentally put time in the, 3 entries in the bookkeeping engagement instead of the year-end engagement, you got to duplicate all your entries in the year-end engagement, then go delete them from the bookkeeping engagement. And I know people should be more careful, but I mean, sometimes Harry doesn't provide enough descriptions on his time entries when Carrie enters them, and they get put into the wrong engagements. And trying to get people to move all their time to the right places at billing time is a huge headache.
Okay. So there's a problem, a challenge with doing that. And that is that I can't move time, like just hit a button and say move to this engagement, if it's not exactly the same. So you entered the time under this phase, under this task, on this date for this project. But what if the place you're trying to assign it to doesn't have that phase and that task? How should Caseware know
Right.
what it should, or how should TBA know what it should go to?
Mhm.
So it becomes really challenging to kind of undo that thing. That's why that's as difficult as it is. It's not obvious sometimes how to make that change. I can talk to the guys and see if they have some suggestions, but that's why that's
Mhm.
always been a pain in the ass.
Unless you first change the engagement and then sort of from that, all that new engagements, phases, and tasks show up. But I don't know how hard that is to program.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk to the guys about it and see what could be involved in making that change.
Sure.
But I know what you mean. It would be nice to just be able to highlight it and say, move to this engagement.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Other
Okay, it's
questions
on the
or
list.
comments?
No.
That's it.
I
That's
think I'm
all.
good for now.
Great. Excellent, folks.
Thanks,
All right.
Jamie.
Yeah, you're
Thanks.
welcome.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
You
Bye.
too.
Bye.
Bye.